If you didn't already know, tonight we're talking about navigating relationships, growing apart or growing together. And I think that tagline alone, when people are asking me, like, oh, what's the topic for tonight? I like that a lot because we've actually talked about navigating relationships as a topic previously, but it was more so from the perspective of just entrepreneurship relationships in general.
Right.
But I think being a little bit more intentional about assessing your relationships and understanding where you stand in those relationships and recognizing if they are actually helping you grow or if you're just remaining stagnant or if it's not really doing something for you, or even just understanding how to maybe navigate through those relationships, especially if you're growing apart, because I think that's something that, and everybody has their ways of doing things. Depending on the situation or the level of the relationship, I think different relationships kind of call for different things, but
Hmm.
yeah, we'll get into that later.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it depends on so many different factors, right? Like how long have you known the person? Are they people you can't get rid of, like family? You can limit your interaction, but like they're always going to be there. And then just deciding on your level of, I think a lot of times people just don't want to get uncomfortable, like when it is time to like set that boundary or even just like spend a little less time. Like they just don't want to have that hard conversation, so things just get awkward for no reason.
hmm Yeah, I think also just knowing what your ideal outcome is because it depends, right? I feel like when you get older as an adult, relationships are already kind of weird. Like it's, keeping up with friends, like everybody's on their own different timeline. They have different things that they're interested in or focused on or taking, activity in. And so sometimes it's also one of those things of just analyzing, like, because you can have different friends for different things, right? And then the relationship dictates itself based off of that. So if it's just a friend that's like somebody that you like to catch up with, and even with that though, like, because when I have these conversations, I'm trying to think of it from a third party perspective, but also relating it to myself. I know for me, I feel like I don't really have too many friends that are just friends for the history of our friendship. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we're just friends
Hmm.
because we have this history together. I've had friends that have wanted to keep the relationship because of that. Like a girl I've known my whole life, and she'll be like, oh, my best friend. And I'm like, but do we really know each other? Like, we were close and we were like five, but
Oh,
you
that's
know,
hilarious.
and so I don't know. Yeah, I think everybody's different, so I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't really have anybody that is just like in my orbit for no good reason. I used to, you know, but I was just talking to someone about, and I don't want to make this like the entrepreneurship advocacy group, but there's something about being an entrepreneur that's like self-development on crack. And I feel like it just makes it so that you just don't have time for the orbit people. And if at the time you don't realize that things are going to change, they quickly change because they no longer get that like same level of attention that they're used to. So they kind of just fall off. But yeah, I don't have like high school friends that I still talk to at all. Like, really, if I see them, it's nothing bad, but it's just like, I don't even know you. I don't know,
Hmm
you don't know me. And I don't feel this urge to just keep up with people just for the sake of keeping up with them. But I have gotten a lot better about being super intentional with the people that I do want in my life because time. We were just talking about how fast it goes and you don't see everybody as much as you'd like to. And so just making sure that you stay connected, even if it's just like, hey, can we have a phone call? Like I have Zoom calls with my friends who live out of state and we just schedule like a monthly call and we get on a call together and we eat dinner and we catch up because otherwise we wouldn't.
hmm
So just making intentional plans so that you can stay connected. And then if there are people that aren't necessarily on the same growth journey, having grace for that with them and limiting how much of the like limiting what you talk about so that you stay in like the pocket that you want to. Like I have a friend who I don't necessarily want to end my friendship with, but I also don't want to gossip with. And
Mm,
so I specifically like go into each conversation with like a plan so that I have topics that we can talk about that have nothing to do with gossiping. But I used to get really frustrated and get off the phone with her and just be like, oh, that was so draining. And then I just realized I was allowing it. So
mm,
I'm a lot better about bringing up topics. And if that doesn't work, I'll just come up with a reason why I gotta go so that I don't feel that way. And then I don't feel this like resent towards wasting time talking about crap I don't want to talk about or politics. She just wants to talk about the news. And I'm like, I don't
mm.
care. It's not my
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I think, it's important too, because you always hear people say that, you're like the five people that you hang around the most. And it's interesting too. I recently just heard Alex Hormozy talking about how he thinks that quote is misquoted, that it should be because I think he was saying that more people, what they really compare themselves to is really what you're trying to emit around yourself. And so I thought that was interesting to think about too. I don't know if I necessarily compare myself to people. I would say that I am a very empathetic person. So being around people, I do tend to like take their energy. I feel like I'm a very, like I mirror and match just unintentionally, like without a second thought. And that's not always the best depending on who I'm surrounding myself with.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's just interesting to first you have to analyze, okay, where are you at? Because like we were saying earlier, not only does time go by so fast, but then you're also just there's so many things that you have going around. Like I'm sure all of you guys have things on your to-do list that you're like always adding to and the list never feels done. And so there's always something that you could be doing. But yeah, I think that's another interesting thing to look at too, is just how the people around you influence you and your thoughts and things like that.
sure.
So yeah, if you guys are on the document, one of the things it talks about is evaluating your relationships. So taking a few minutes just to reflect on the key relationships in your life. And I think it'd be cool if we kind of went through the questions together. But the first one
Yeah,
is an alignment check. So when it comes to the relationships, are you growing in the same direction? Do you share the same values, goals, or visions? I think that's a really good question to ask. I feel like, and I don't know what you guys think, but asking these questions, it's almost similar to like the balance of everything. Like when you're talking about how you balance your diet or your work-life balance, like sometimes we go one complete extreme versus another. I think it really just depends on the goals that you're trying to achieve. But I feel like it could almost be mean, but it's like when I think of this question of if we're growing in the same direction, if the answer is no, and I just want growth in some aspect. Like it doesn't have to be
sure.
financial, it could be spiritual, it could be physical, but if there's nothing that you're bringing to the table or that, you know what I mean? Like I said, it's just there's so many other things that are going on. I don't feel like there's an excuse to kind of try and force a relationship just because.
Yeah, I want
And
to be around people who are aspiring for something,
yes.
right?
And I
And
was
then
going to
that is
say,
inspiring.
yes, I was going to say a phone works both ways. And I think that's a big thing too. I know for me, I'm typically the one that's reaching out to people. And that's why I kind of let people be how they are. And I don't know if this is a good thing too, because I've always been a very open door person. So if somebody comes back, I'm like, oh yeah, hey, whatever. Like I no hard feelings on my end. Like the door's always open. But it's also a little bit draining too if somebody like just comes in and out as they please or like however's convenient for them. Because then you're trying to show up for them when they're there, but it's a little bit one-sided. Yeah, just
Yeah.
my thoughts.
Have to force myself not to reach out to people because I'm trying to get over that. Like, why are you always the one making the effort? Like, they never reach out to you, like, they don't ever text or call. And I'm like, man, I gotta stop. Like, if these people don't want to be in my life, why do I keep making, you know what I mean? Like, it's draining,
Hmm.
upsetting, but you gotta let them go sometimes.
Do
Hmm.
you feel like they're receptive when you reach out? Because I am for sure the one that doesn't reach out. And it's not because I don't care about you. Jackie, I love you to pieces. But when do I ever just like randomly text you? Because it's just not how my brain works.
That's
And I think
hilarious because I feel like we talk a lot.
we do. I mean, especially now that we're doing this call
Yeah.
together, right? But, and I think for me, when I've tried to evaluate it, because I've always been like that, if you reach out to me, like I'm quick to like continue the conversation because I'm happy I hear from you. But I think for me, I think it stemmed from like being a kid and not wanting to be or my childhood and then not wanting to be a burden to people. So like reaching out to people feels like I'm bugging you because I know we're all busy. And so it's like this subconscious thing that happens that's like, unless it's something like I have to talk to you about it right now because it's somebody we know or something that's important, I generally don't just check on people. And I know that can go both ways. Like Meg was just saying, like you feel like the person's not interested. And the people that I care about that do reach out to me, I'm very excited to hear from them. And I do want to spend time with them and I do want to talk to them. It's just not something that comes naturally to me. And so that's something I've been working on because I don't want it to be or to feel one-sided because I genuinely care and I'm happy to hear from them. So I feel like if you're feeling some kind of way, maybe ask them like, is this something like, do you want to hear from me? Because I don't want to be bothering you. And if they seem like happy and excited to talk to you and they continue the conversation, like maybe they're just more like me and they're not just jerks.
I'll say, I feel like there's layers to this because, like, as you guys are talking about this, one of the girls I was on a call with yesterday, she was referencing something because we were talking about like personalities, who you're hiring on a team, something like that. But essentially, she referenced herself of how she was talking to somebody that's been helping her with things, and she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna get this done or whatever, and like I'll text you later this week or something." And then she was like, "Hold on, okay, when I forget to text you later this week, will you just reach out to me anyways on this date or whatever?" Because she's like, oh, let's be real, I'm not going to do that. And I feel like this kind of goes along that line where like maybe even checking in of like, where is this relationship at? You know, like to your point, you could have friends that like maybe you don't talk for 6 months, but you always pick up where you left off. Everybody's cool. But like if it's leaving you with less than preferred feelings or tension or whatever, then like maybe those are the ones that we just kind of, let it dissipate or whatever, if you will.
Right. Or they don't ask you about yourself, like how you're doing. If there's not like this like reciprocal flow,
Absolutely.
then I could, for sure.
Like I feel like there has to be something else, like it's not necessarily always just like okay, well, I'm always gonna initiate or you're always gonna do this or it's always gonna,
And I
like
feel like that exactly. That leads right into like that number 2, the energy
Mhm.
audit of like, I knew you were going
Mhm.
there. I could see your face. Is it like uplifting? Like, do you feel good? Is this feeding like a positive energy in your zone? Or do you just feel like drained because you're the one that's constantly having to like care for people? Because like, don't do that. You don't want to be drained by anybody. So,
That's a good one.
Mhm.
and then obviously the communication flow, right? Like, how does that feel? Do you feel like there's mutual respect and do they check in on you too? Like, even if it's because you reached out, they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't talked to you in so long. How's your life? Like, how are, like they're interested and they genuinely are open to you sharing. So,
Yeah, I think the evaluating your relationships, that whole section is extremely important. Mainly, obviously from you to them, but also them to you. Like, how are you influencing this person's life? Because it's like, okay, I know that I'm a positive influence in people's lives, just in general. And that's just, I'm not saying this about myself. This is just a concept, right?
or
If
I'm
I'm a
sure you are
positive,
though.
appreciate that. If I'm a positive influence on people's lives, am I a positive influence on this person's life? Like, have I known this person our entire relationship? Let's say it's 2 years long. I've known this person for 2 years. Has there been anything that I've done or said to this person that has made an impact on that person? And and that's another way to assess relationships is not only how you relate to them, but how they relate to you. That's a little bit side to what we've talked about so far, but I'm curious what you guys think about that.
I like it because I feel like that turns it in on you, right? That's more like inner work
Mhm.
and making sure that like you're not just expecting things from people, but not and not providing it.
Mhm.
So I like that.
For me, it made me think of someone in particular, more in the from the perspective of like when you said, what is it that you're bringing to that person? And I don't really have friendships like this now, but it was more so like when I was younger that you have those friends that look to you for guidance sometimes because they know you're going to say the right things and then they never act on those things. It's like they just want to hear it, but then they're still going to do what they want to do anyway. And I think that just goes back to like auditing your relationships because if you have a person like that in your life, like that's something you have to be careful of because it can almost negate what you're saying or what you believe because you're coming from a genuine place of like, hey, I just want to help you or I care about you and that like you're coming to me for this advice and here I am giving it to you, but then there's no like action with that. And so being mindful of that, like I think it's okay and maybe sometimes it feels weird because it's like you almost feel like that person needs someone like you in their life, but you also kind of have to put the boundary of, what you say matters. And if it's not being respected, then that's not necessarily a respectable friend.
Totally, because if you think about it, like you stop what you're doing. We just I think we underestimate the value of time
Hmm.
often on a lot of its topics, but I feel like specifically on this because I've had a friend that was similar, where you literally stop what you're doing and you're fully present to support them through whatever this is, and then they don't do anything about it. And they're quick to come back the next week or the next month or whatever. And so, like, it's draining. Your time was not respected and you have to take responsibility because you keep doing it, you know? So it's like there's a point at which you're just like, you know what? I'm good. Like I love you. And that sounds tough. I don't know what else to say because it feels like I have talked to you about this before or something similar, and then nothing changed. And so maybe you need a diary. Like I don't, like I can't keep doing this where I feel like nothing progresses in it and you just want to stay where you're at. And that's tough to listen to because I love you.
And they might still need to hear that, but you might not be the right person. However you
That's true.
say it might not be the way that they need to hear it. But exactly what you're saying, Monica, that feeds right into the energy audit. Like if you're just pouring your energy into somebody else and they're just water off a duck's back, you can't like you can't just pick that energy back up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think
It's
it's the
gone.
it's the growth factor too, because
Hmm.
you're asking like, has this relationship contributed to my growth and am I contributing to theirs? And
Right.
you might be trying to, and they're, even potentially seeking it from you. But yeah, it's definitely a weird dynamic to be in if you're having someone come to you for advice and then them blatantly not taking it. I think that, like I said, it's almost diminishing to what you had to say on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to set boundary like with my very best friend in the whole world because she is married to the worst human being on the planet.
Mm.
But it's like every conversation we had, it was talking about him and how horrible he was. And I'm like, it makes me angry. It drains me, and it's been 7 years of this. Like, this can't be a part of our conversation anymore. Like, I love you. I'm here if you really need me, obviously. But like, I can't talk about him every time.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also the question of like, do you want advice or do you just want me to listen because you need someone to talk to? Because that might be part of it too, you know? They might just need someone to talk to. And you can still draw the boundary that I don't want to be the person that you talk to about it because it hurts me to hear you talk about it. But there is that, there's that change of like maybe you don't need to be draining so much energy trying to come up with ways to solve her problem or their problem or whoever it is that you're talking to. It could just be that they just need someone to listen. And because a lot of us are naturally helping giving people, we want to come up with solutions and we want to come up with ways to fix it. And then it becomes this 2 hour long conversation when really they just need 15 minutes of blah. Like, I just need to get it out.
I was thinking that earlier too, as you guys were saying some of these scenarios of like sometimes like we're in like you need advice mode and they're really just like need a verbal vomit. Like, you
I
know,
usually I
that-
usually give people a warning shot
Mm,
because it's very easy for me to kind of just jump in. I feel like the oldest sibling will jump in and instantly want to fix things. And I'm the oldest in my family, so that's what I identify with.
Same.
But
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm young, but in my experience, just based on friendships or talking with siblings who might be struggling, or even parents, I'm at the age now where my parents, it feels like the roles are starting to reverse. And I give a warning shot, and I'm just like, do you want bitch out for a second? Or do you want some advice? And
Yes.
and then it's kind of a choose your own destiny, and then it allows me to kind of set up guardrails for myself so I'm not overstepping a boundary.
Yeah.
That's great. I was just talking to a friend earlier about this too, and we were talking about like almost just like framing conversations for overall communication, but I think it applies to this as well. To your point, if you know that about yourself going into it, and if you're the one receiving it, to your point, being like, hey, how are we? What are we addressing here? Like, what are we walking into? You know, if you tell me like, hey, I've had a bad day and I really just need to vent right now. Is that okay with you? You know, do you have time for that? Then if you say no, it's like, okay, cool, not right now. I need to go find somebody else for this.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into the first exercise. And I know for me, where I'm at in my life right now, I really don't feel like I have too many of those relationships. Like, for the most part, if it's not a mutually beneficial thing, I think I've gotten past that point of feeling like I have to keep those friendships. And I feel like that, like, you kind of get to a point where you both feel that, whether that person's growing or they're staying the same, they can see from your perspective, like, okay, we're kind of not on the same page anymore, or on the same frequency, whatever. So the chart, I really like how Monica made it, identifying the relationship and analyzing it. Is it an aligned relationship, or is it a strained relationship, or is it evolving? And the evolving, I really like that word a lot, because even if you have a friend where you might not be on the same wavelength, that relationship can still evolve in a way where it still works for the two of you. And I think that's a beautiful thing too.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you
Um,
change expectations, right?
hmm And then, yeah, figuring out the next steps of what that looks like. But yeah, letting go can be hard for some people. I don't know if you guys feel like that at all, if that's something anyone's going through.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What is it, do you think, that is hard about the letting go?
Think for me, it's the history of the friendship. Think letting go is just like a really cathartic feeling in general.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have the history and, almost like this deep rooted foundation with someone that you've known for years, it hurts. It like
Hmm
it hits different. So it's just like, not to sound like super dramatic about it, but it feels like a hole was blown into your life. And it's like that void is just like it's fresh. And that's my thing.
Yeah. Do you think that there's opportunity to like change your perspective on now there's this opening for fresh, exciting, more aligned energy?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I don't think with me, it's like it's almost like I try to convince myself like I'm ready to move on, I'm ready to move on. And my body is rejecting that. It's like, no, you're not. It's like when you let go or when it is a clean break like that, it's a grieving process. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like I think we go through the 7 steps, whether it's a romantic relationship or a deep-rooted friendship, there is a point of separation and a process to go through it. And you may tell yourself like verbally, like, I'm ready to move on, but your body is not, or your mind is not, or your heart is not, or a
Mm-hmm.
combination of those three are not.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, absolutely. I think the natural process is, yes, like I've fully let go. I've fully forgiven the relationship and honored it. The space is primed for something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes I think it's hard for us to let go of our ego's need to hold on to like the investment we made. I invested so much time and energy into this. Like I tried to make it work. I did this, I made this compromise, I made this sacrifice, regardless of whether it's friendship or relationship. And our ego is like, absolutely, like this is, I'm not letting go of this. Whether obviously it's never that blatantly conscious, but there's that hold on to the investment I made and how could this happen and da 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 da.
Mhm.
And it's just like that's literally the risk of loving anybody. That
Yeah,
is, you sign up for that with every single relationship. Like there is a risk that this person is no longer going to be there for you or in your life on some capacity. And it's like we don't consciously make that choice when we start a relationship with someone, friendship or romantic or even business a lot of times. Like we're not consciously making that choice of like, I'm taking a risk, investing time, energy, and emotions into this person. Um,
exactly. There's
but
always a
we do.
trade-off.
Yeah.
Like there's always a trade-off in energy and resources. If it's business, it's money and resources and time. If it's a relationship, it's energy, resources, like mental capacity. Like there's always like, okay, I'm invested in this and I'm going to invest this much of my energy. Whether the other person does it or not, it's not up to you. You know, you can have conversations and hopefully they're constructive, but to each their own for everyone at the end of the day.
I
That was
invite
great.
everyone to, yeah,
That
I
was
invite
great
everyone to
dialogue.
do that. It was, right? What's up,
Daniel.
Daniel?
Hello, you beautiful people. I
Hello, sir.
wanted to touch upon what Lauren mentioned earlier as well, because I know where he was trying to come from when he was saying, like, not to be dramatic, but it was a hole in your heart. That's what it feels like to me. And there was like a couple people that I was really, really close with at one point to where I was spending hundreds of dollars, especially during times when I didn't have a car to pay for Ubers just to go visit them over in Tampa and then go back to my place where Valrico. And it wouldn't even be for like a full day or 2 days of hanging out. It would literally just be for a night. I get off of work, take an Uber to their place in Tampa, spend a couple of bucks in order to like just have Wendy's, McDonald's, or whatever. And then like wake up early in the morning, spend a couple other bucks in order to go back to work and then do the same thing that same day. And I'll leave my car at the house. And the history, not just the monetary value of the money, but also the history of like you're willing to put forth that amount of effort into making a friendship work out and not even realizing that they never felt the same way about you. And when you come to that realization, it was like, what the hell?
Hurts.
It's like like exactly like you said, it's a big hole. And it's like, okay, if this one thing didn't, work out for how they felt about me, or this other thing towards like our interests or opinions are vastly different from each other, and I've been the one that just now noticed it, how long have they felt about it? And then it gets even worse to where you have a conversation to take it a step further, and they're like, oh, I've always been that way. I'm like, really? How come I'm just now finding out about it years later? And it's rough.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually it gets to the point to where I not only have had it happen to me like once, twice, or thrice, but a few times to where you would think I'd learn my lesson but didn't. And luckily it happened in my early 20s, like around 2021, to where now I'm 25. And as much as I hate to say it, I'm a little bit more on the reserve side nowadays just because it's almost like it hurts to open up like that again and to hang out with someone like that on a deep personal level to where they can affect you like that again.
Mm-hmm.
Create a hole in your space, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a
Do
whole different
you,
heartbreak too when it's like supposed to be a ride or die friend. You know what I mean? And then they just switch up on you. That shit hurts. It's almost worse than a relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Because like a relationship, it's almost, to me at least, with relationships, and I'm speaking from my perspective and my history on it, it's one person, and yeah, you're a little bit more intimate with them than you are with your friends. But with your friends, longer amount of time, more stuff that you did with them, albeit not on an intimate level like you did with your girlfriend or significant other. And on top of that, it's also a group of people that you've associated yourself with that friend as well. And you run the risk of like, if I remove myself from this person's life, do I also remove myself from the other people's life associated with that person?
mm-hmm.
And that's how it was for me. Like one of the friends I was really good friends with, like a group of 7 people. We've always went out, always did things. And next thing you know, me removing myself from that basically cut myself from everybody else in that group. And I hurt.
Yeah,
I mean, that's leaving you even more space.
exactly.
It's a
And
bigger space that's kind of
yeah,
emptied, but you have more space when you heal from that for the good stuff.
for sure. My invitation to you or anyone with feeling that like deep grief feeling is trying to reframe it as just different levels of growth, right? So like the person you were when you started talking to these people or gaining this friendship with these people is someone that wasn't as aware, wasn't as mindful of their energy, wasn't as like didn't set up the boundaries for themselves of like what they're willing to do and not do. And so you were just at a place where you were, these people aligned with you on some level and you were investing into that and you weren't taking care of yourself enough to pay attention that it wasn't being reciprocated on a regular basis. And so I think a lot of the times when we feel these like deep pains, it's a way for us to protect ourselves from being mad at ourselves for allowing it. Like, I didn't see this happening. I wasn't paying attention. I traded like my self-respect for their time and their energy, and they really weren't even providing anything that valuable. And so while we're deeply mad at ourselves, we project it onto this person and how could they and who like blah 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 blah. But in reality, like they've probably been that person the whole time, like you said, and you just weren't seeing it because you were getting something from that situation. And so allowing yourself to recognize like I've shed that person and now I'm more aware. And you said reserved, but I think you might just be more selective and more aware about who it is that you want to invest your precious time and energy into. That's my reframe for it, an invitation for you to do the same.
Oh, I agree. I like what you mentioned, how instead of reserve, it's selective, and I would actually agree with that. Because nowadays I have noticed myself being more, like you said, selective. Very few people I let inside like that nowadays. And the only people who I would consider that knows me very well would be my parents, like you guys know, Robert and Maggie, and my siblings. Everybody else, to put it
What
nicely,
about us, Daniel?
there's a reason why I'm opening up to you guys on here.
And
You
I
guys-
feel like saying selective makes it more of like gives you your power back versus reserved makes you feel more, I don't want to say the word victim, but more like something is happening to you and you're protecting yourself from it versus selective is like I'm in my power and I'm choosing where my energy and time goes.
And I
I'd
got
also venture to say that like our emotions they can overlap, right? Like I feel like both things can be true. Like you could
Absolutely.
acknowledge that like you're coming into this power, that this is the right decision, but like, I mean, take something maybe a little bit different of like a job. You could have been in a job for several years, gotten to know everybody, moved up the ranks, like that's been your livelihood for a long amount of time for you to really have some roots there. And you decide like, hey, I'm taking a venture to something else, or you got a better offer or whatever. Like there's still going to be an overlapping, this is good, but I think it's okay to like sit in that grief of like it is a breakup, if you will,
Totally.
and going through that, roller coaster of change, which is like there might be a moment where you feel on top of the world where you're like, this is great and I'm super excited. And then you have that in between where you're like a little nervous and like we're a little scared about this. And then there's the next day where you're like, holy crap, this is a lot. Like, what in the world are we doing? And I think it's okay to just kind of like let yourself go through that and know that like both are okay, you know?
Absolutely.
yeah.
This is good. These
Yeah.
are good topics.
That was right into the setting boundaries and intentions,
Totally.
Monica. How you do that?
Oh.
I have it sitting in front of me.
Just that good. Just
Uh,
that good.
But yeah, if you can't read it, I'll read it to you guys. But setting boundaries are key to maintaining healthy relationships. So, a couple of prompts for you guys to consider. Number one, a boundary I need to reinforce in a relationship is blank. Number two, a conversation I need to have to create clarity is blank. And number three, an intention I want to set for my relationships moving forward is blank. So I think it's good to have an understanding of the boundaries that you want to set, especially when you have experiences that allow you to carry into future experiences. You're like, okay, I've learned from this past experience. Moving forward, this is a boundary that has to be set up front so that I don't allow for the situation to happen again. Or even just a conversation. I think setting upfront contracts and everything that you do is a really good way to just make sure that everybody's on the same page with things. And so even just having the conversation of clarity for maybe a new relationship, but even a relationship that you already have going on where it's like, hey, like you were saying earlier, Monica, like, oh, I feel this way, but, I just want to make sure, are we on the same page? Like, is this something you actually want from me? Or, am I overstepping if I do this or whatever the case may be? And then also just setting that intention too, so that you can start calling into your energy and your atmosphere those ideal relationships that you're looking for. But yeah, I like those prompts.
You too. Yeah, and I think a lot of times we get stuck in this like things are happening to me rut, instead of recognizing like, oh, I totally allowed that person to do that for X amount of times. And then there was a point at which I just didn't want to do it anymore. But that at that point, that person's already used to doing it. So like, are
Mhm.
they really doing anything wrong, or are they just continuing down the path that you've set forth? Are they used to you being the one that calls all the time? Are they used to you being the one that shows up all the time? Are they used to you being the one that pays for everything all the time? And then tomorrow you're just like, I don't want to pay for shit anymore. And they're like, what? You've always paid for stuff like that. Didn't seem to be a problem before. Now, granted, there are people who are just like takers and like, but you still have to be mindful of the places that you have contributed to whatever scenario there is. It takes two to tango, is what I'm trying to say. It comes from both sides, and people will do what you allow them to do. And so recognizing like, I don't want to do that anymore, and trying to communicate that in the most effective, and then deciding if it's a relationship you want to continue or not, right? Because that changes what you say. You can still communicate why you're ending the relationship, but if it's a relationship you want to keep going, you want to make sure you communicate that in a way that says like, hey, I'm here to take responsibility for how I've contributed to this, but I don't want to keep doing it the way that it is.
Yeah, and that leads right into we have our red flags and our green checks. So growing together, that's going to look more like you supporting each other's growth and celebrating wins, open and honest mutual respect and communication, challenging each other in a way that promotes personal development, effort from both sides of the relationship, and that you align in your values even if your lives look different. Red flags and growing apart, it's going to look like conversations that feel surface level or forced, you feeling drained or uninspired after a conversation, misalignment in values, priorities, or energy, resentment, avoidance, or lack of interest in each other's lives, or the relationship is based on old versions of who you used to be. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is a lot of the times when you feel like there's people that you've got to kind of close the door on, it's because you're a new version of yourself and it can feel hard, especially like we were saying before, like the history that's there. It's almost hard to like it's like closing the chapter in a book that like you're not going to go back to and
Right.
realizing that and just I mean I feel like with everything change is hard for most people. It's uncomfortable, it's scary, like there's uncertainty and but when you look at it from the perspective of what's best for you and what you're looking to get out of certain things. And you take it from that perspective of, okay, I'm doing what's best for me and this version of who I am now and prioritizing yourself in that. I mean, it can be hard, but it's powerful and it's good. And that's why it's good to also just surround yourself with people that are kind of doing the same thing. They're going through the same motions. You guys can relate to each other through those experiences and then grow together.
Yeah. I feel like that's that last one where it's like based on old versions of yourself. We're living with ourselves every day, right? So we know how much growth we're doing. We know that we're reading the books and listening to the podcasts and doing the inner work. But like a lot of the times, these people that you don't see very often aren't on that journey with you. And so one day when you meet up, all of a sudden you're talking about different things, or you look differently, or you're using different vocabulary, or your interests are completely different. That's might cause some tension or some headbutting, And so just having some grace of like, oh, you haven't been on the journey with me. Let me update you, kind of a thing. And allowing for that, like maybe you just don't align anymore, and that's okay. Like, they want to stay where they want to stay, and you're ready to keep growing. And one of the things that I heard recently, we watched this ridiculous dating show on YouTube, and one of the people was like, growth is a mandatory, like, it's mandatory. If you're not somebody who is interested in consistently growing, I don't want to be with you. And I was like, I love that, because I think we set ourselves up for failure if you are that type of person and you align or you get into a relationship with someone who's not, and they just are cool with coasting through life the way that they are. And that's their journey. But hopping on the same train with someone who's cool with staying on the same track while you're like, I'm never going to be the same. Like, next year, I expect to know 10 times the stuff I know this year. And that's just how I want to live my life. It just doesn't seem like an alignment. So I do think that's why a lot of people who are entrepreneurial kick it together, because like we don't expect ourselves to be the same. Like, who knows what you're going to be into next week, you know? And that's exciting and fun for the people who want to be on that journey. So I feel like I
Yeah.
went off on a tangent.
No, it's good.
I-
I think, oh,
like-
go ahead.
If you want to find out who like your true friends are, just start that healing process. You know, start that spiritual journey. They just start falling off. And I don't know if it's because like, I don't know why or what it is, but it's wild.
It really
You don't have
is.
that fire in your belly too. I don't even want to, you know what I mean? Like, there's no point in us having a relationship. I only want people that are going up and doing better. And so,
And some people
Exactly.
just aren't there yet. Everybody's on their own
Yeah.
timelines, and that's an okay thing. But I think that's the hard part is we all, I think, avoid trying to have uncomfortable conversations. Like, that's not our first instinct is to just rip the Band-Aid and do those things. But typically, I mean, the other person on the other side, they feel the same way. They're just coming from a different perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's just, getting more comfortable doing the uncomfortable is what's going to help you keep moving forward. But I think the best takeaway on our list, and you guys can look at the rest later, but my favorite is that not all relationships are meant to last forever, and that's okay. And I think that's just something that, like you said, Monica, when we're getting into the relationships, we're not necessarily thinking about either the outcomes or the expectations or, what could happen or, what we're exchanging. And as long as you operate from the level of doing things without any expectation and understanding what your boundaries are and, what your values are, then you're going to be able to navigate through the relationships that come your way.
Yeah. I used to read a lot of books I've read 3 books by a Buddhist nun named Pema Chodron. And Buddhism is all about like impermanence, like nothing is permanent. And as soon as you can make peace with that, like your life is just so much lighter and easier. It's still like I'm not a Buddhist, so let's start there. But recognizing that, like, having this expectation that people are supposed to just be with you forever, no matter whether they're your friends or your partner or whoever, is setting yourself up for failure. Like, your intention for every relationship should be to show up as your best self. And as long as you are in alignment with like, I want the best for you, you want the best for me, and we're us being together, friends, partners, business partners, whatever it is in alignment with us being our best version of ourselves, then let's go. Let's run out the clock. But if it's not, then I want the best for you. And wherever that is, it may not be here. And that, I think, is truly loving somebody. So
I love it. All right, cool. Anyone else have anything else they want to add before we get into the meditation?
they're ready.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. Let's get into a comfortable seated position. Taking 3 deep breaths in and 3 deep breaths out. With each inhale, finding all of the old stagnant energy in our bodies. We've been talking about some heavy things, some open wounds potentially. So as you breathe in, gather any mess, any pain, resentment. And with each exhale, releasing, removing, clearing that energy out of your body. On your last inhale, making sure you fill your belly and your chest. And as you exhale, releasing, relaxing, softening. I want you to imagine a time where a relationship didn't go the way you expected. Maybe there's pain there, or maybe you can remember what that felt like when things ended. Whether you ended it or they did, whether it was expected or a surprise. Imagine that feeling inside of a bubble floating above your head. And as you start remembering different things about what happened and who said what, add those thoughts into the bubble. The little feelings that pop up that remind you of how much it hurt or the frustration that came with that ending, put it all inside the bubble. All the I should have knowns and how could they's, all of that goes in the bubble. And as you breathe in, you can see the bubble floating higher and higher. And as you breathe out, you allow it to float away, releasing it with loving energy for who you were at the time. For who they were at the time. And allowing space in your body, in your heart, in your mind, and in your life for energy that is in alignment with who you are today. for how you want to show up in your relationships today. And maybe that space you've created allows you time to think about people you do want to spend more time with, to give more energy to. Maybe that space allows you to meet new people, try new things, practice setting a boundary, clearing old stagnant energy allows for practicing and reinforcing habits and boundaries that will reinforce and support the way that you want to show up in your relationships. It leaves space for people who are in alignment with you. It allows you to pour into them. It allows you to self-reflect on ways that you can show up more intentionally. It allows for acceptance and grace. As you take a deep breath, fill your body with fresh air. Fill your body with fresh energy. With each inhale, feel your capacity for growth and understanding to expand. And with each exhale, set an intention to give more energy to the people who fill your cup, who uplift you. Send them loving energy from afar. Inhaling positive, loving energy. Exhaling, sending that same energy to each person in your life that you love and appreciate. I appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to share space with us, be vulnerable and open. We appreciate you. The light in me sees the light in each and every one of you. Namaste. And as you take your next inhale, you may want to stretch and wiggle your fingers and toes. Slowly open your eyes and come back to the room.
That was great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for a great conversation. I hope you were able to get something out of it. And if you guys finish the week strong, yeah, if you guys need anything, you know where to find us, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll post the doc in the group, in the Facebook group, so you guys can do some exercises if you're up for it.
Sweet.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you guys.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
See you later. Bye.